Welcome to Red Eye Story Hour for tales told after midnight. I'm your host and author, R.J. Burley. Please like, subscribe, and share. If you wish to support my work, please buy my books at the links in the description. Thank you. I dedicate this story to my wife, who is my editor. My own note. Although this is not one of my more terrifying stories, this is my deepest, darkest fear as a writer. It's titled The Horror Novel. I recently left a review on an online bookstore. I regretted doing so. I think I did what was right. It was actually a good review for the author, but I wasn't exactly honest. Hell, I flat out lied. Well, I kind of lied. I think I did what was best, but it is not sitting well in my stomach at the moment. I was only able to read a bit of his horror novel, but the book made me realize that the real horror is not in fiction, but rather real life. The review for the book read, "This book was written by a man who is a true inspiration." That part of my review was 100% correct. His life was a magnificent inspiration. I continued on the review. I have read much in the horror genre, and I can honestly say that I have never read anything written like this. The author really puts his heart and soul into the book like no one else can. And that was all I wrote. The rest of that could be construed as true as well, but not as most people would understand it, as I will tell. I then clicked 5 stars out of 5 to finalize my review. The whole incident started when I visited a local flea market with my girlfriend Rachel. We're at that point in our relationship where all she has to do is look at me, and my heart melts. She has the most radiant eyes and a smile that lights up my heart. At just a glance, I know her wishes, and my soul instantly feels compelled to fulfill it. She isn't just beautiful, but she has a pure spirit that I fall in love with more each day that passes. And I could tell that she felt the same for me. I wasn't too thrilled about going to the flea market, but it was at her insistence, as well as an excuse just to be with her. I controlled my impatience as she looked at all the eclectic wares throughout the many stalls in the open-air market, from the fresh produce to antique jars that were bought by people to decorate windowsills. Some intricately hand-woven tapestries caught my attention, but they were out of my price range for now, and I had nowhere to put them in my petite apartment. No, the flea market wasn't my type of place, but I got to hold her hand and talk to her when she wasn't looking at decorative boxes, too small to hold anything. However, due to my love of horror stories, I desired to stumble upon an ancient cursed ring, or some babble, that would bring me into the world of a Lovecraftian Cthulhu mythos. I didn't count on it, but you know how imagination is. However, my lack of interest changed to excitement as I saw a banner ahead. It was garishly colored, but not too over the top. It showed a picture of a man in a leather fedora. I recognized the face and the hat from the photo in a newspaper. The booth wasn't selling anything antique or mysterious, but rather horror novels. I recognized the name of the local author. I had seen advertisements in the local hipster rag that advertised, "A local writer writes local horror in local scenery." I know they say that there is no such thing as bad publicity, but I will leave his name out just because, well, you shall see. Beyond the book, his life itself was a really inspiring story. Teamed with his wife, he had been a renowned internet marketing genius. He had acquired great wealth, but he had been in a motorcycle accident where he acquired a severe head injury and was subsequently confined to a wheelchair. Because of this, he was forced to retire. Deep inside, I wondered why he retired if his mind was sharp enough to write novels. From what I read in the paper, he took the lemons that he had been dealt, and in his wife's words, turned them into a blessing. In his retirement, he followed the passion of his youth, and he was now writing horror novels. I guessed that the near-death experience made him appreciate his true goals. His wife, who was a professional editor, guided him and helped him release the stories. They still obviously had their marketing touch, as I felt more and more compelled to buy a book from him. I almost jerked my girlfriend along as I grasped her hand tighter and made a beeline to his stall. The middle-aged writer greeted us with the most kindly smile under his signature leather fedora. His face was a bit lopsided from the decreased motor skills from the head trauma, but the brilliant light in his eyes and the warmth of his face really drew me in. His wife smiled at us as well, but her smile, although bright with pearly white teeth, didn't reach her eyes. There was a hint of sadness in them. He sat in a motorized wheelchair, and his wife stood hovering, almost protectively, over his shoulder. I shook his hands. His grip was firm, but inconsistent. From his injury, his arm was stiff and hardly bent at his rigid elbow. His thumb wrapped around my hand and squeezed almost painfully, but the other fingers were lax from apparent nerve damage, other than his ring and pinky fingers, which firmed the grip like a crab's pincer. "I heard a lot about you," I told the author in a complimentary tone. His smile evaporated, and he pinned me with an unsettling stare as he growled, "From home." I was discombobulated until his face broke into a grin and he erupted into an infectious laugh. "You are everywhere," I said as I laughed with him. "I read the article about your inspirational recovery and your new career." Rachel leaned into my side and said to him, "Dave's been meaning to read your books for some time. You're a breath of fresh air on this shopping trip from hell." He's a big fan of horror or any weird tale that you can imagine. The author laughed and looked at me with sympathetic eyes. My wife drags me places too. I then reached over the author's shoulder and shook hands with his wife. I said to her, "I hear you are the famous editor." She bit her lower lip with my praise, and there was an awkward pause in the conversation until the author blurted out with fury and in a booming voice that I hadn't considered him capable of producing. "Editor? No, it's all me. She just checks for punctuation," he stated. His tone was hard. His eyes were fierce as he continued. "I choose every word carefully, very carefully." I smiled, thinking he was joking again, but his eyes grew harder as they watched my expression. If he hadn't suffered the injury, if he hadn't been confined to the wheelchair, I would have thought he was challenging me to a fight just by the fire in his eyes and the way he leaned towards me. I was actually thankful there was a table separating us. He continued, "I write for 12 hours a day, every day. I am not disciplined. No. I am driven, passionate. Every word that I write means the world. I can't change anything. When I do edit, it's very precise, to get the true feelings across. Every word is precious. The world, and purposefully placed." His wife patted his shoulder and said to me in a pleasant voice that seemed to calm him, "He might spend over an hour just constructing one sentence. He's very passionate. Each and every word means everything to him." "Everything," he reiterated. He crossed his arms as if still challenging me, but he leaned back in his chair, diffusing some of the tension. Pride now colored his voice. "My horror writing is so intense that many of my friends avoid speaking to me after reading my novels," he said proudly. His wife looked away as even if she was unsettled by what he wrote. Despite the circumstance, I found his passion inspiring rather than frightful. I was definitely hooked. In recent years, I felt that I was becoming jaded when it came to reading intensely written novels. I felt challenged to read his book, especially if those close to him were changed by his writing. I nodded as he finally resumed his pleasant smile. His voice also now charming again, and full of love as he spoke about his wife's help. She is a great help, and does write the synopsis for the back cover. As the conversation continued, I picked up the first thick book in the series and glanced over the back cover that promised a story of vampires that read, "A tale of swashbuckling horror, as lightning fast as a sword fight." Right up my alley, I thought. Yes, his wife said. His talent is writing the long story. Mine is providing the hook in a few words on the back. Yes, he agreed. That is the work that she does. How can you sum up your heart and soul in a paragraph from a novel that covers over 500 pages with a few trite lines on the back? I mean, I worked in marketing. My job was to do that for others, but when it's your own baby, sometimes you need an outside hand. I replied, I understand that. I saw a panic in the wife's eyes as I started to open the book to skim a few pages inside. But before I could read anything, Rachel tugged on my shoulder, and I saw that a line of a few people had accumulated behind me as I had been speaking to the author and his wife. I apologize, I said, when I saw that I was making his potential readers wait. I will buy this book if you could sign it. I gratefully handed over the $20 in cash. It was on the expensive side, but I thought it would be well worth it. Of course, he said, and with a stiff arm, the author signed it. I excitedly walked away with Rachel, satisfied with my purchase. I looked over my shoulder, and my heart was warmed as I saw the author signing another book as he joked with a new customer. The fire of inspiration burned in my heart to see someone who survived a near-death experience with life-altering changes enjoying the life that he had been giving. Deep inside, I doubted that I could continue with such optimism. To spend so much time wordsmithing was a bit tedious for my nature. I preferred to read what others created. In a way, I not just respected him, but I envied his zeal. As we walked, I let go of Rachel's hand and excitedly opened the book to a random page to get a taste of his writing style. I shook my head as if to clear it as I read. I couldn't believe my eyes. The page I was looking at had the word jackass written continuously in a solid block for a whole page. I opened to another page, and it was a solid block of gibberish. There were some actual words, mostly profanity, but overall it was just a jumble of letters randomly spaced. For a moment I wondered if my mind wasn't working. I continued to leaf through and saw the entire novel was just blocks of typed nonsense. "What's wrong, David?" Rachel asked as I realized I had suddenly stopped walking in my shock. I couldn't answer as my mind sorted through my feelings. I felt my anger building at getting ripped off, but there was also a bit of horror at how someone's mind could be so off. I was about to turn around to complain. I'm not the type to get gypped and just shrug it off. But I was startled as a hand suddenly grabbed my shoulders. The fingernails desperately dug into my shirt and into the skin of my shoulder. I turned and saw the author's wife restraining me. I was about to speak my mind, but I couldn't voice my anger as I stared into her dismal eyes. "Please," she begged. I continued to stare at her as I saw her handing me the $20 that I had just paid. "Please," she said again. "Take the money. We don't need it, but don't get mad. The writing," she said the word with hesitation and paused before continuing. "This writing of his is all that keeps him going. To him, what he writes looks magical, but it doesn't register," she trailed off. "Please, don't say anything to him." I stared at her for another moment, then sighed as I saw the author hand over another signed book, take the money, and shake hands with the customer. His eyes, alight with what I originally took for his mad zest for life, now it looked like only madness. I could see panic building in his wife's eyes as she knew that she would have to chase down another person to give the refund. Keep the money, I said, with compassion for the husband, but more so for the wife who dealt with the love of her life's broken mind. Refusing the money, I kept the book, grabbed Rachel's hand, and left in a hurry. For some reason, I felt guilty. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed the story. As I said, this is one of my biggest fears. When starting out in any endeavor, one is inundated with criticism. When one gets better, the criticism slows, and there's that eerie feeling of waiting for the other shoe to fall, so to say. I usually have the feeling that I'm an imposter, and that what I write is gibberish. And yes, my wife, who is also an author, edits my work. But in her case, she is very honest in her criticism. But there is always some of that lingering doubt in my mind. So if you like this, I will be uploading more stories about twice a week. Also some stories about just writing in general. So please like and subscribe. If you wish to support my work, please see the links in the description and buy one of my 4 novels. I should have a 5th novel and a short story collection out in the next year. Again, thanks and have a good day.